The story begins in the West African Kingdom of Dahomey, where the powerful Agojie, an elite group of female warriors, are preparing for another dangerous battle against their enemies. Led by the experienced and respected General Nanisca, the Agojie are known throughout the region for their discipline, courage, and extraordinary fighting abilities. These women have dedicated their lives to protecting King Gezo and the kingdom, living under strict rules that demand loyalty, strength, and complete commitment. Nanisca has spent years fighting and has witnessed the brutality of war firsthand. But she understands that the future of Dahomey depends on the strength of its warriors. At the same time, the kingdom faces pressure from rival groups, particularly the Oyo Empire, whose soldiers are powerful and determined to maintain control over the region. Dahomey has been forced to pay tribute to the Oyo for years, and Nanisca believes that continuing to live under their influence will eventually destroy the independence of her people. While the Agojie remain fiercely loyal to the king, Nanisca begins thinking about a different future for Dahomey, one where the kingdom can stand on its own without surrendering its people or resources to stronger enemies. Inside the palace, King Gezo is also considering the future of Dahomey. He understands that his kingdom is surrounded by threats and that the Oyo Empire has the military power to punish Dahomey if it refuses to obey. The king wants to strengthen his kingdom, but he knows that doing so will require more warriors and greater unity among his people. Nanisca encourages him to invest in the Agojie and increase their influence because she believes these women can become the foundation of a stronger Dahomey. The king respects Nanisca because she has proven herself through years of service, but he also understands that changing the kingdom's position will create serious consequences. The Oyo will not easily accept a stronger Dahomey, and any attempt to challenge their authority could lead to another devastating war. Nanisca knows this danger, but she also knows that remaining weak is not a safe option. Her determination begins shaping the kingdom's military strategy and gives the Agojie a greater purpose beyond simply protecting the royal palace. Meanwhile, a young woman named Nawi is living with her father and struggling against the future that has been chosen for her. Nawi is strong-willed, independent, and unwilling to accept a life where she has no control over her own decisions. When her father tries to arrange a marriage for her, Nawi refuses to accept the man he has chosen, and her defiance leads to a serious conflict between them. Her father eventually takes her to the royal palace and offers her to the king, believing that she can become part of the Agojie. Nawi enters this unfamiliar world with no understanding of what awaits her. But she quickly discovers that the Agojie are unlike anything she has ever seen. These women are trained to fight, endure pain, follow orders, and protect one another. For Nawi, joining them represents an opportunity to escape the life that was being forced upon her. But it also means accepting a level of discipline and danger that she has never experienced. Navi meets other recruits who are also beginning their training, including Agojie, a confident and experienced warrior who becomes one of the most important influences in her life. Agojie has a sharp personality and a strong sense of humor, but beneath that confidence is a warrior who understands exactly what it takes to survive within the Agojie. She immediately recognizes that Navi is stubborn and inexperienced, but instead of rejecting her, she begins teaching her how to adapt. Navi struggles during the early stages of training because she does not yet understand the importance of teamwork and discipline. The Agojie are not simply teaching the recruits how to use weapons. They are teaching them how to control fear, trust their fellow warriors, and remain calm when facing an enemy who wants to kill them. Navi discovers that becoming an Agojie requires more than physical strength. It requires emotional resilience and the willingness to put the group before herself. General Nanisca watches the new recruits closely and quickly notices that Navi has unusual determination. Nanisca is demanding because she knows that hesitation can mean death in battle. She expects every recruit to obey commands immediately and refuses to tolerate weakness that could endanger the entire group. Navi struggles with this harsh training, but she refuses to give up. Her stubborn nature, which caused problems with her father, begins becoming an advantage within the Agojie. She is willing to challenge herself and keep going even when the training becomes painful. Nanisca sees that Navi has potential, although she is careful not to show favoritism. The recruits must prove themselves through discipline, courage, and loyalty before they can truly become warriors. The Agojie training camp becomes a place where the recruits begin developing strong relationships. Navi becomes close to Izogi and other warriors, learning that the women around her are not simply soldiers, but a family built through shared hardship. Every training exercise teaches them something about themselves. They learn to fight together, move as a unit, and protect one another. Navi begins understanding why the Agojie have earned such a powerful reputation. Their strength does not come from individual warriors alone. It comes from their unity. When one woman falls, the others are expected to help her rise. When one warrior is in danger, the others do not hesitate to intervene. This sense of loyalty gradually changes Navi's understanding of what it means to belong to a group. As the recruits continue training, Nanisca's concerns about the Oyo become more serious. Dahomey has recently taken action against groups connected to the slave trade, creating tension with powerful regional forces. Nanisca understands that the kingdom's enemies are watching closely and waiting for an opportunity to strike. She wants Dahomey to become economically and militarily independent, but she also knows that achieving this goal will require difficult decisions. The Agojie are willing to fight, but Nanisca does not want them to become soldiers in a war that exists only to protect the interests of powerful men. Her experiences have taught her that war can destroy lives even when leaders believe they are fighting for a noble cause. She therefore begins thinking about how Dahomey can change its future rather than simply winning another battle. The relationship between Nanisca and Navi slowly becomes more significant as the young recruit develops. Nanisca recognizes qualities in Navi that remind her of herself, particularly the girl's unwillingness to accept a life controlled by others. However, Nanisca remains distant because she knows that emotional attachments can make leadership difficult. She must treat every warrior fairly and prepare them for the possibility that some of them will not survive. Navi, meanwhile, wants to earn Nanisca's respect and prove that she deserves to stand among the Agojie. Her determination pushes her through increasingly difficult training, and she begins developing the skills needed to become a real warrior. The kingdom's political situation grows more dangerous as the Oyo continue demanding tribute from Dahomey. King Gezo is faced with a difficult choice. He can continue following the old system and avoid immediate war, or he can support Nanisca's vision of a stronger and more independent kingdom. The decision is complicated because Dahomey's economy and political power are connected to the regional slave trade, and Nanisca increasingly questions whether the system can continue. She believes the kingdom must find another path if it wants lasting independence. Her ideas challenge powerful traditions, but she is willing to speak openly because she has seen the consequences of conflict and captivity. Navi's transformation continues as she becomes more comfortable with the other recruits. She begins learning how to fight with weapons, improve her physical endurance, and control her emotions. Agojie encourages her to embrace the strength she already possesses rather than trying to become someone else. Navi's rebellious personality remains, but it becomes more focused. She is no longer fighting simply because she dislikes being told what to do. She is learning to fight for a purpose and to trust the women beside her. The Agojie become the first place where Navi begins to feel that her strength has meaning and that her future can belong to her. General Nanisca understands that the recruits may soon be needed in real combat. The Oyo threat is growing and the kingdom cannot afford to remain unprepared. The experienced warriors continue training while the new recruits are pushed harder, knowing that battle may come before they are ready. Nanisca's leadership becomes increasingly important because she must balance the safety of her warriors with the survival of Dahomey itself. She knows that every decision she makes could determine whether her people remain independent or fall under the control of their enemies. The Agojie prepare themselves for whatever comes next, while Navi begins discovering that becoming a warrior means accepting responsibility for more than just her own life. The kingdom stands on the edge of a dangerous period, with political tension, military threats, and internal questions about its future all growing at the same time. Nanisca has a vision for Dahomey. King Gezo must decide whether he is willing to support that vision, and the new recruits are discovering what it truly means to become Agojie. Navi, once a young woman resisting an unwanted marriage, is now beginning to understand the strength she can find through courage, discipline, and sisterhood. The women around her have become her teachers and companions, while Nanisca's leadership gives the warriors a purpose larger than themselves. Dahomey may appear powerful from the outside, but its enemies are preparing to challenge it, and the Agojie will soon be forced to prove whether their reputation as fearless warriors can survive the greatest threat they have ever faced. The tension surrounding Dahomey continues to grow as General Nanisca prepares the Agojie for the possibility of another major conflict with the Oyo Empire. The warriors understand that the enemy is powerful and that the kingdom cannot afford to underestimate them. But Nanisca also knows that simply sending soldiers into battle is not enough. The Agojie must remain united, disciplined, and prepared to make difficult sacrifices. Meanwhile, the new recruits continue their demanding training, and Navi gradually becomes one of the more determined members of the group. She still struggles with discipline and sometimes allows her emotions to control her, but she is learning quickly. Agojie continues guiding her, teaching her how to fight with confidence, while also reminding her that an Agojie warrior survives because she trusts the women fighting beside her. Navi begins forming genuine friendships within the group, and the women who initially seemed like strangers slowly become a new family for her. Nanisca watches Navi's progress carefully and recognizes that the young recruit has something special. Navi is not the strongest or most experienced fighter among the women, but she has an unusual ability to keep going when others might give up. Nanisca knows that determination can become more valuable than raw physical strength when a warrior is facing a dangerous enemy. At the same time, Nanisca remains strict because she understands that the Agojie cannot afford emotional mistakes. She pushes Navi and the other recruits harder, making sure they understand that battlefield courage is not about being fearless. It is about controlling fear and continuing to act when everything around you is telling you to run. Navi slowly begins to understand this lesson, and her attitude toward training changes as she realizes that every exercise could one day determine whether she survives a real battle. The political situation becomes more complicated as King Gezo considers how Dahomey can escape the influence of the Oyo. The kingdom has been paying tribute to the Oyo for years, and this arrangement has weakened Dahomey's independence. Nanisca believes that the kingdom must become stronger and develop a different future, but changing the old system will not be easy. The king has to think about the safety of his people, the strength of neighboring powers, and the economic interests that keep the kingdom functioning. Nanisca argues that Dahomey cannot remain dependent on a system that constantly places them under the control of another empire. Her position is dangerous because challenging established traditions can create enemies inside the kingdom as well as outside it. Nevertheless, she continues pushing for change because she believes the Agojie are strong enough to defend a more independent Dahomey. Navi's confidence continues growing as she spends more time with Agojie and the other warriors. Agojie becomes a mentor who teaches Navi that strength is not only about physical ability. An Agojie warrior must also understand when to listen, when to act, and when to protect another warrior instead of herself. Navi's rebellious personality sometimes causes tension, but she is beginning to understand why the rules exist. She learns how to move with the group, use her weapons more effectively, and remain focused under pressure. Her training also gives her a new sense of identity. Before joining the Agojie, Navi was defined by her conflict with her father and the marriage he wanted to force upon her. Now she is discovering that she can define herself through her own choices. During this period, Nanisca's own past continues affecting her leadership. She has experienced terrible violence and understands the consequences of being captured by enemies. The memories have never completely disappeared, and they influence the way she views war, slavery, and the protection of young women. Nanisca wants the new generation of Agojie to be strong, but she also wants to prevent them from suffering the same experiences she endured. Her determination to protect them sometimes makes her appear cold or demanding, but beneath that harsh exterior is a deep fear of losing the woman under her command. Every recruit represents a life she feels responsible for protecting. The threat from the Oyo eventually becomes impossible to ignore. Dahomey's actions have angered powerful enemies, and the kingdom's leaders understand that retaliation could come at any time. Nanisca begins preparing the Agojie for combat, while King Gezo considers the political consequences of refusing to submit. The warriors sharpen their weapons, improve their formations, and prepare themselves mentally for battle. For the experienced Agojie, this is familiar territory. But for Nawi and the newer recruits, the possibility of facing real enemies creates a completely different kind of fear. Training can never fully prepare someone for the moment when an opponent is actually trying to kill them. Navi begins proving that she can handle more responsibility. Her confidence has grown and she is no longer simply following the other women. She is beginning to understand how to make decisions during difficult situations. Agojie notices this change and continues encouraging her, while the other recruits begin respecting Navi's determination. Their friendships become stronger because they are sharing the same hardships. The Agojie are trained to think of themselves as sisters, and that bond becomes increasingly important as the possibility of war approaches. Navi now understands that her survival may depend on the woman standing beside her. just as much as on her own skill. The pressure also increases within the royal palace. King Hezo must decide whether he is willing to support Nanisca's more aggressive approach toward independence. Some people around him prefer maintaining the existing system because it provides political stability, while Nanisca believes that stability without freedom will eventually become another form of weakness. The king respects her judgment, but he also knows that open conflict with the Oyo could place the entire kingdom at risk. Nanisca insists that the Agojie are ready and that Dahomey must stop allowing fear to determine its future. Her confidence gives the king courage, but the decision still carries enormous consequences. As the warriors prepare, Nanisca speaks to the Agojie about their responsibility to one another. She understands that some of them may not return from the coming conflict, but she refuses to allow fear to divide them. The women train together and strengthen their formations, becoming more coordinated with every exercise. Navi watches the experienced warriors and realizes how much she still has to learn. At the same time, she recognizes that she has already changed. The girl who once struggled simply to accept her circumstances is now willingly preparing to risk her life alongside other women. She has found a purpose that she never knew existed. The kingdom's enemies also begin moving closer, and the possibility of an attack becomes increasingly real. The Agojie are placed on higher alert, and the warriors know that the next battle will not be another routine mission. Nanisca remains focused on strategy, carefully considering how to protect Dahomey while minimizing the loss of her warriors. She understands the strengths and weaknesses of the enemy and knows that the Agojie will have to rely on speed, discipline, and surprise rather than simply matching the enemy's numbers. Her leadership is tested as she prepares both the experienced warriors and the new recruits for what lies ahead. Navi's relationship with Nanisca also becomes more complicated as she tries to earn the general's full respect. Nanisca sees potential in her, but she refuses to make things easy. Navi must prove that she can follow orders even when she disagrees and that she can control her emotions when someone she cares about is in danger. These lessons are difficult because Navi has spent her entire life resisting control. Now she has voluntarily joined a group where obedience can mean the difference between life and death. Slowly, she begins understanding that discipline does not necessarily mean losing freedom. It can also give a person the ability to protect themselves and the people they love. The closer the kingdom moves toward war, the stronger the bond among the Agojie becomes. The warriors understand that they are not simply fighting for the king or the palace. They are fighting for their sisters, their homes, and the possibility of a future in which Dahomey is not controlled by another power. Nanisca's vision begins spreading among the women, and the recruits start understanding why she is so determined. For Navi, this becomes especially meaningful because she has finally found a community where she feels valued. The Agojie have given her a purpose, but they have also given her people who will stand beside her. The first signs of direct conflict eventually begin appearing, and the warriors know that their preparation is about to be tested. Navi has trained for this moment, but she understands that no amount of practice can completely remove fear. Agojie reminds her to trust what she has learned and to stay close to the women around her. Nanisca prepares the Agojie with the seriousness of a commander who knows the cost of war. Every warrior understands that the coming fight could change the future of Dahomey forever. As the kingdom prepares for confrontation, the difference between the new recruits and the experienced Agojie begins to disappear. The training has transformed them from frightened young women into disciplined warriors capable of fighting together. Nawi has become stronger, faster, and more confident, while her connection with the other women has given her the courage to face the danger ahead. Nanisca watches her warriors with pride, but also with concern, because she knows that leadership means accepting the possibility of loss. The Agojie are ready to defend their kingdom, and Dahomey is preparing for a conflict that will test not only their strength, but also their determination to control their own future. The situation in Dahomey becomes increasingly dangerous as the threat from the Oyo Empire moves closer to open conflict, forcing General Nanisca and the Agojie to prepare for a battle that could determine the future of the kingdom. The warriors have trained hard, and the newer recruits are finally beginning to understand what it means to fight as one unit rather than as individuals. Nawi has changed considerably since she first arrived at the palace. She is now more disciplined, more confident, and much more comfortable with the women who have become her sisters. Izogi continues to guide her, reminding her that courage does not mean acting without fear, but knowing how to keep moving despite it. Nanisca watches the young warriors closely because she understands that their first real battle will test everything they have learned. At the same time, the political situation becomes more unstable as Dahomey attempts to resist the control of the Oyo. The kingdom's decision to challenge the existing balance of power creates a dangerous situation because the Oyo have more soldiers and resources, and they are unlikely to allow Dahomey to become independent without a fight. Nanisca begins planning how the Agojie can use their strengths against a larger enemy. She knows that the women cannot simply meet the Oyo soldiers in a straightforward battle and expect victory through numbers. Instead, she relies on speed, discipline, surprise, and the unique training of her warriors. The Agojie have spent years learning how to move quickly and fight as a coordinated force, and Nanisca intends to use those abilities to their advantage. She also understands the importance of protecting the younger warriors because their lack of experience could become a weakness. Navi is determined to prove herself, but Nanisca knows that bravery without discipline can place an entire unit in danger. She therefore continues demanding that Navi follow instructions and trust the warriors around her. The young recruit gradually learns that becoming an Agojie is not about proving that she is stronger than everyone else. It is about understanding that every decision she makes can affect the survival of the woman fighting beside her. The first major confrontation brings the reality of war directly into Navi's life. The sounds of weapons, shouting, and chaos are completely different from anything she experienced during training. The enemy is no longer a distant threat, and the warriors have to rely on their instincts immediately. Navi feels fear, but she remembers the lessons she has been taught and stays close to the other Agojie. Agojie remains a source of confidence for her, while Nanisca commands the warriors with determination. The Agojie move with remarkable coordination, using their weapons and formations to create openings against a larger force. Their training allows them to respond quickly, but the battle also shows how dangerous their situation truly is. Warriors are injured, some are captured, and the Agojie realize that victory will come with a heavy price. The conflict also exposes the brutal nature of the enemy. The Oyo soldiers are determined to weaken Dahomey and restore their authority, and they are willing to use fear and violence to achieve their goals. Nanisca knows that the Agojie cannot afford to become careless. Every captured warrior represents a potential source of information for the enemy, and every mistake could lead to the destruction of the entire group. The general therefore becomes increasingly focused on protecting her warriors while also searching for ways to strike back. Her leadership is tested because she has to make decisions that could save some lives while putting others at risk. Nanisca carries the emotional burden of these choices, but she refuses to allow fear to interfere with her responsibilities as a commander. Navi's experience in battle changes her understanding of what it means to be a warrior. Before this moment, she had imagined fighting as something that would prove her strength and independence. Now, she realizes that war is frightening, painful, and unpredictable. She sees people she cares about placed in danger, and the reality of losing someone becomes impossible to ignore. Instead of running away, however, Navi stays with the Agojie and uses what she has learned. Her courage is no longer based on rebellion. It comes from her desire to protect the women who have accepted her as one of their own. This change marks an important step in her maturity because she begins understanding that true strength is connected to responsibility. Agojie continues playing an important role in Navi's development. She has become one of the people Navi trusts most, and their friendship represents the sisterhood at the center of the Agojie. Agojie is experienced, confident, and willing to take risks, but she also understands the emotional cost of war. She encourages Navi to remain strong while reminding her that the warriors must protect one another. Their bond becomes even more meaningful as the conflict grows more dangerous. Navi has finally found someone who believes in her abilities, and Agojie sees the potential that Nanisca also recognizes. Their relationship demonstrates that the Agojie are powerful not simply because they are trained soldiers, but because they create a community where each woman can become stronger through the support of the others. As the fighting continues, Nanisca begins realizing that the conflict is larger than a single battle. The Oyo are not simply trying to punish Dahomey. They want to maintain their influence and prevent the kingdom from changing the political system that has benefited them for years. Nanisca understands that if Dahomey wants lasting freedom, it will need to survive the conflict and create a different future. She becomes increasingly determined to convince King Gezo that the kingdom cannot continue depending on old systems that leave them vulnerable to stronger powers. Her vision is dangerous, but she believes that Dahomey has the strength to change. Inside the palace, King Gezo is forced to consider the consequences of the growing conflict. He knows that the Agojie are brave, but he also understands that courage alone may not be enough against a larger empire. The king must balance Nanisca's desire for independence with the responsibility of protecting his people. Every decision could lead to greater violence, and there are people around him who would prefer to return to the old arrangement. Nanisca argues that Dahomey has already suffered enough under the control of others and that the kingdom must choose its own future. The king begins listening more closely to her because he sees that her determination comes from years of experience rather than simple ambition. Meanwhile, Navi's connection to Nanisca becomes increasingly important. Nanisca has always treated her strictly, but there is a deeper emotional connection between them that Navi does not fully understand. Nanisca recognizes qualities in Navi that remind her of her own younger self, including the desire to control her own destiny. However, Nanisca also carries painful memories that make her reluctant to become emotionally vulnerable. She wants Navi to become strong enough to survive without depending on anyone, but at the same time, she feels a powerful instinct to protect her. Their relationship becomes complicated as Navi begins sensing that Nanisca may know more about her past than she has revealed. The war creates new challenges for the Agojie as the enemy continues searching for ways to break their defenses. Nanisca has to think beyond individual fights and develop a strategy that can protect the kingdom from a prolonged conflict. The women are exhausted and every battle risks reducing their numbers. Yet their determination remains strong because they know what is at stake. If Dahomey loses, the kingdom could fall under outside control and the lives of many people could change permanently. The Agojie therefore continue fighting even when the situation appears overwhelming. Navi becomes increasingly capable on the battlefield. She has learned to remain calm under pressure and trust her training. Her movements are more controlled, her decisions are faster, and she understands how to work with the other warriors. She no longer needs constant guidance from Agojie or Nanisca. Instead, she begins becoming a warrior who can protect others herself. This growth is especially important because Navi's original motivation was simply to escape the future her father had chosen for her. Now she is fighting for something much larger. She has found a new identity and a new family, and she is willing to risk herself to protect them. The conflict also forces Nanisca to confront her own past. Memories of captivity and violence continue influencing her decisions, especially when she sees young women facing the same dangers she once experienced. She understands the cycle of violence that has affected so many lives, and she wants to break that cycle for the next generation. Her leadership is therefore motivated by more than military victory. She wants Dahomey to become strong enough to determine its own future and to give its people a chance to live without constantly being threatened by stronger powers. This goal makes the coming conflict deeply personal for her. As the situation becomes more desperate, the Agojie are forced to make difficult sacrifices. Some warriors are captured or killed, and the survivors must continue fighting despite their grief. Navi experiences the emotional cost of war firsthand and begins understanding why Nanisca has always been so strict about discipline. Every mistake can have consequences that cannot be undone. The bonds between the women become stronger because they know they may have to depend on each other at any moment. Even when fear spreads through the group, they continue standing together. The relationship between Nanisca and Navi eventually reaches a point where the young warrior begins questioning the secrets surrounding Nanisca's past. Nanisca has spent years carrying memories that she rarely discusses, and the pressure of the current conflict makes it harder for her to keep those emotions hidden. Navi senses that there is a personal connection between them, but she does not yet understand its full meaning. Their relationship becomes part of the larger struggle because Nanisca's decisions are no longer based solely on military strategy. She is also thinking about the future of the young women she has trained and whether she can protect them from the pain she experienced herself. The Oyo threat continues growing, and the Agojie realize that the conflict cannot be solved through isolated victories. Dahomey will need to make a decisive stand. Nanisca prepares her warriors for the possibility of their most dangerous confrontation yet, knowing that the enemy will be determined to destroy their resistance. Navi and the other recruits have become real Agojie warriors, but they still face the same fear that every soldier experiences before a major battle. They understand that courage will be tested not during training but when they are forced to choose between survival and protecting the people beside them. The future of Dahomey now depends on whether the Agojie can withstand the pressure of a stronger enemy and whether King Gezo is willing to embrace the changes Nanisca is demanding. The warriors have already proven that they can fight, but the coming struggle will require even greater sacrifice. Nawi has transformed from a rebellious young woman into a committed warrior, while Nanisca has become increasingly determined to create a future that breaks away from the systems that have kept Dahomey vulnerable. Their stories are now deeply connected, and the fate of the kingdom will depend on the strength, loyalty, and courage of the women standing together under the Agojie banner. The conflict between Dahomey and the Oyo Empire becomes more dangerous as the enemy increases its pressure on the kingdom, forcing General Nanisca and the Agojie to prepare for a struggle that will demand everything they have. The warriors have already experienced the brutality of battle, and the newer recruits now understand that fighting is very different from training. Nawi has become more confident and capable, but she is also beginning to understand the emotional cost of war. The women around her have become her family, and the possibility of losing them makes every battle more personal. Nanisca remains focused on protecting Dahomey, but she is also carrying the burden of her own painful past. Her experiences have taught her that enemies can take away more than territory. They can destroy families, freedom, and entire communities. Because of this, she is determined to prevent the same fate from reaching the next generation of Agojie. She believes that Dahomey must become strong enough to control its own future, even if achieving that freedom requires confronting powerful enemies. As the fighting continues, the Agojie face increasing pressure from the Oyo forces. The enemy is better prepared and has more soldiers, which means Dahomey cannot depend on his strength alone. Nanisca uses a strategy and the unique abilities of the Agojie to compensate for the difference in numbers. She understands that her warriors must strike quickly, remain coordinated, and avoid being surrounded. Every decision is made with the knowledge that a single mistake can cost several lives. The experienced warriors help guide the younger women, while Nawi becomes increasingly useful during combat. She no longer behaves like the uncertain recruit who first arrived at the palace. Her movements are controlled. Her confidence has grown, and she has learned to trust her instinct without abandoning the discipline Nanisca demands. The young warrior is beginning to understand that the true strength of the Agojie comes from fighting together, rather than trying to prove individual superiority. The relationship between Nawi and Agojie becomes even more meaningful during these difficult moments. Agojie has been one of the people who helped Nawi adjust to life as an Agojie warrior, and their friendship has given Nawi confidence when she struggled with training. Agojie is experienced enough to understand how dangerous the situation has become, but she continues encouraging the younger woman to remain strong. She represents the spirit of the Agojie because she can be fierce in battle while still caring deeply about the women around her. Nawi looks up to her and begins thinking of her as a true sister. Their bond demonstrates how the Agojie create their own family through shared experiences, discipline, and loyalty. Even when the enemy threatens to break them apart, the women continue fighting because they know that protecting one another is part of what makes them powerful. Nanisca, meanwhile, is forced to confront memories she has tried to bury for years. The war brings back painful experiences from her past, reminding her of the violence and captivity she suffered when she was younger. She knows exactly what the enemy is capable of because she has personally experienced their brutality. These memories make her protective of Nawi and the younger Agojie, but they also create emotional conflict within her. Nanisca has always presented herself as a strong general who cannot afford to show weakness, yet her past proves that even the strongest warrior can carry wounds that never completely disappear. She fears that the young women she has trained could suffer the same fate, and this fear becomes one of the reasons she is determined to defeat the forces threatening Dahomey. Navi begins noticing that Nanisca's connection to her is deeper than that of a normal commander and recruit. Nanisca has always watched her carefully, and certain moments suggest that she knows something about Navi's past that has never been explained. Navi becomes curious and starts questioning why Nanisca seems so emotionally affected by her. The truth surrounding their connection gradually becomes clearer, revealing a painful history that connects Nanisca to Navi's family. Nanisca's past is tied to the violence that once destroyed her life, and Navi's existence becomes a reminder of everything she lost. This revelation changes the way Navi sees her commander. Nanisca is no longer simply the strict general who trained her. She is a woman carrying years of pain, regret, and responsibility. The discovery creates complicated emotions for Navi because she has already developed a strong bond with Nanisca. She has spent much of her life wondering where she belongs, and now she is faced with a truth that changes her understanding of her own identity. Instead of rejecting Nanisca, however, Navi begins understanding why the general has always been so protective of her. Nanisca's harshness was never simply about discipline. She was trying to prepare Navi for a world that had already taken so much from her. The two women are forced to confront their connection, while the kingdom around them remains under threat. Their relationship becomes another example of how the past can continue influencing the present, especially when people have never had the chance to heal from what happened to them. At the same time, King Gezo faces increasing pressure to decide how Dahomey will respond to the Oyo. The king understands that continuing the old system may temporarily reduce conflict, but Nanisca argues that it will never give the kingdom true independence. She wants Dahomey to reduce its involvement in the slave trade and develop other sources of strength and prosperity. Her vision challenges powerful traditions because the kingdom has benefited from the existing system for years. Gezo is caught between the practical realities of maintaining his kingdom and the possibility of creating a different future. Nanisca's arguments become increasingly difficult to ignore because the current system has already placed Dahomey in repeated conflicts with neighboring powers. The Agojie continue fighting despite their losses, and the pressure begins affecting everyone. The women know that they cannot simply wait for the enemy to become weaker. They must take action and protect their kingdom before the Oyo can completely overwhelm them. Nanisca develops plans that depend on speed and surprise, while the warriors prepare themselves mentally for another dangerous confrontation. Navi is now trusted enough to participate more actively, and she begins demonstrating the leadership qualities that Nanisca has been trying to develop in her. She no longer needs to be constantly reminded to protect the women beside her. That instinct has become natural, and she now understands that being an Agojie means accepting responsibility for everyone in the unit. The battle becomes increasingly brutal as the two sides fight for control. The Agojie use their training to move through the enemy lines, but the Oyo soldiers are determined and heavily armed. The women have to fight with everything they have, and the emotional pressure is enormous because they know that failure could mean the destruction of their kingdom. Navi faces situations that test her courage, but she continues fighting because she refuses to abandon the women who have become her family. Her development is now clear. She is no longer fighting simply because she wants freedom from her old life. She is fighting because she has found something worth protecting. Nanisca's leadership is also tested by the possibility of losing the women she commands. Every casualty affects her deeply, even when she cannot show it. She understands that a general must sometimes make decisions that feel cruel because the alternative could be even worse. Her greatest responsibility is not simply winning battles, but ensuring that as many of her warriors as possible survive. This becomes increasingly difficult as the enemy pressure intensifies. Nanisca's own emotional wounds make the situation even more painful, but they also give her a deeper understanding of what the warriors are fighting for. The conflict eventually reaches a point where Dahomey must make a decisive stand. The kingdom cannot continue fighting endless battles without a clear strategy for the future. Nanisca believes that the Agojie must take the initiative and strike at the enemy's strength rather than waiting for another attack. The warriors prepare for the confrontation, knowing that it could be the most dangerous mission they have ever faced. Nawi and the other younger Agojie are now ready to fight alongside the veterans, and the distinction between recruits and experienced warriors has largely disappeared. They have become a unified force. Navi's connection with Nanisca gives her additional motivation. Learning the truth about her past forces Navi to reconsider everything she believed about her family and her own identity. She realizes that Nanisca has spent years carrying the consequences of events that were never truly her fault. Instead of allowing the revelation to divide them, Navi begins accepting Nanisca as part of her life. Their relationship becomes one of mutual understanding, with Navi finally seeing the woman behind the general's strict exterior. Nanisca in turn realizes that Navi is no longer the helpless child she once worried about. She has become a capable warrior who can make her own decisions. The Agojie prepare for a final confrontation with a renewed sense of purpose. They know that their enemy has strength, numbers, and determination, but they also know what they are fighting for. Their kingdom, their sisters, and their future are all at stake. Nanisca reminds them that they are more than soldiers. They are the defenders of Dahomey and the people who will determine whether the kingdom continues living under fear or begins building a new future. Her words strengthen the warriors and they move toward the coming battle with determination. The struggle becomes a test of everything the Agojie have learned. Their discipline is tested by chaos, their courage is tested by fear, and their loyalty is tested by loss. Navi proves that she can stand beside the strongest warriors without hesitation, while Agojie and the other experienced women continue leading through example. Nanisca remains at the center of the fight, determined to protect the people she loves and end the threat that has haunted Dahomey for so long. The women understand that victory will require sacrifice, but they are unwilling to surrender the future they have begun imagining. As the battle reaches its most dangerous stage, the Agojie fight with extraordinary determination. Navi faces the enemy directly, using the skills she has developed through months of training. She has become stronger not because she has lost her individuality, but because she has learned how to combine her own strengths with the discipline of the group. Nanisca fights with the experience of a veteran warrior and the emotional determination of someone protecting her family. The two women now stand together with a shared understanding of their connection, and their fight becomes about more than revenge. It becomes a struggle to break away from the past and create something different. The conflict begins moving toward its decisive moments as the Agojie push back against their enemies. Dahomey's future remains uncertain, but the warriors have demonstrated that they will not simply surrender. Their resistance has already changed the balance of power within the kingdom, and King Gezo is beginning to see that Nanisca's vision may provide a path toward a stronger and more independent Dahomey. The women have fought through fear, loss, and betrayal, and they now stand closer than ever to determining what kind of future their kingdom will have. The struggle for Dahomey reaches its most dangerous stage as General Nanisca and the Agojie prepare to face the Oyo forces in a decisive confrontation. The warriors have already suffered losses, but their determination remains strong because they understand that surrender would place their kingdom and their people under the control of their enemies. Nawi has now become a completely different warrior from the young woman who first arrived at the palace. She has learned discipline, developed confidence, and discovered a deep sense of loyalty toward the women who became her family. The truth about her connection to Nanisca has also changed their relationship, giving Nawi a deeper understanding of why the general has always watched over her so carefully. Nanisca, meanwhile, has finally been forced to confront the painful memories she has carried for years. But instead of allowing those memories to control her, she uses them as motivation to protect the people she loves. The Agojie understand that the coming battle will be extremely dangerous, but they are prepared to fight together rather than allow fear to divide them. Nanisca knows that the enemy has an advantage in numbers, so she develops a strategy that depends on the unique abilities of the Agojie. The warriors must move quickly, use the environment to their advantage, and remain coordinated even when the battlefield becomes chaotic. Their training has prepared them for this kind of situation, but Nanisca also understands that no strategy can completely eliminate the possibility of loss. Every warrior must be willing to make sacrifices for the group. Nawi and the other younger Agojie have reached the point where they can fight alongside the veterans without constant supervision. Their transformation has been remarkable because they have learned to trust their instincts while still following orders. The Agojie now operate as one force, and their sisterhood gives them strength when the pressure becomes overwhelming. The final confrontation begins with the Agojie attacking the enemy with speed and determination. The battlefield quickly becomes chaotic as warriors from both sides clash. Nanisca leads from the front, refusing to ask her women to do anything she would not do herself. Nawi fights alongside the other Agojie and proves that her training has prepared her for real combat. The danger is greater than anything she has experienced before, but she does not freeze. Instead, she uses her skills and relies on the women around her. The enemy attempts to overpower them with greater numbers, but the Agojie's discipline allows them to continue resisting. Every movement matters, and every warrior understands that protecting the person beside her is just as important as defeating the enemy in front of her. The battle becomes especially painful as the Agojie suffer more losses. Nawi realizes that courage does not guarantee survival, and she is forced to confront the possibility of losing people she loves. The emotional cost of war becomes impossible to ignore. The women who once trained together and laughed together are now fighting for their lives. Nawi's experiences have taught her that being an Agojie means accepting this responsibility, but knowing the risk does not make the pain easier. She continues fighting because stopping would mean abandoning the sisters who are depending on her. Her courage is no longer about proving herself. It is about protecting the people who gave her a place to belong. Nanisca also faces one of the most difficult moments of her life, as the battle forces her to confront the memories that have haunted her for years. She has spent much of her life believing that strength means hiding pain, but now she realizes that acknowledging her past does not make her weak. The suffering she experienced shaped her, but it does not have to control her future. Her relationship with Nawi gives her another reason to fight. Nanisca does not want the young woman to inherit the same fear and trauma that she carried for so long. She wants Nawi to have the freedom to become her own person, and this desire gives Nanisca additional strength during the battle. The conflict also changes the way King Gezo views Nanisca's vision for Dahomey. The king can see that the Agojie are not simply palace guards. They have become the most visible symbol of Dahomey's strength and determination to survive. Nanisca has repeatedly argued that the kingdom needs to become more independent and reconsider its involvement in systems that keep it vulnerable to outside powers. The war makes the consequences of those systems impossible to ignore. Gezo begins recognizing that Dahomey's future cannot depend entirely on maintaining old traditions. If the kingdom is going to survive, it will need to change. Nawi's actions during the battle demonstrate how much she has grown. Earlier in her life, she often acted without thinking because she wanted to prove that she could control her own destiny. Now she understands that true independence requires responsibility. She can make her own choices, but she also has to consider the consequences for the people around her. On the battlefield, she protects other warriors, follows strategic commands, and remains focused even when she is afraid. The young woman who once rejected every form of authority has learned that discipline can give her greater control over her own life rather than taking that control away. The relationship between Nawi and Nanisca becomes one of the emotional centers of the final struggle. Their connection is complicated by the painful history they share, but the truth also gives them a chance to understand each other. Nanisca has spent years carrying guilt and grief, while Nawi has spent much of her life searching for a sense of identity and belonging. Now they have the opportunity to build a relationship based on truth rather than secrecy. Nanisca no longer sees Nawi simply as a young warrior who needs protection. She recognizes her as a strong woman capable of standing beside her, while Nawi begins seeing Nanisca not only as a general, but also as someone who has survived enormous suffering. The Agojie continue their fight even as the situation becomes more desperate. Their greatest advantage is their unity. They know how to move together, cover one another, and react quickly when the battlefield changes. Their training has transformed them into a disciplined force that can challenge a larger enemy. The warriors also understand that their fight has become symbolic. They are defending more than a palace or a king. They are defending the possibility that Dahomey can determine its own future. This gives them a reason to continue even when victory appears uncertain. As the confrontation intensifies, Nanisca takes greater risks to weaken the enemy and protect her warriors. She knows that the battle must end decisively because Dahomey cannot survive an endless conflict. The Agojie follow her commands and push forward with everything they have. Nawi becomes an important part of the effort, demonstrating that the new generation of warriors is ready to carry the traditions of the Agojie into the future. The older warriors have taught them discipline and courage, and now the younger women must prove that they can protect the kingdom themselves. The fighting eventually begins turning in Dahomey's favor as the Agojie use their superior coordination and determination to overcome the enemy's advantages. Their victory does not come easily. Every step forward is paid for through sacrifice, and the survivors are forced to remember those who did not make it through the battle. Nanisca understands that winning a war does not erase the pain it causes. She mourns the women she has lost while recognizing that their sacrifices helped protect the future of Dahomey. Nawi also begins understanding the responsibility that comes with surviving. She must carry the memories of those who died and use what she has learned to help build something better. With the Oyo threat weakened, Dahomey finally has an opportunity to move toward a different future. King Gezo recognizes the importance of the Agojie and the leadership Nanisca has demonstrated. The kingdom has survived the conflict, but Nanisca knows that military victory alone will not solve every problem. Dahomey must still decide how it will deal with the slave trade and how it will build economic strength without remaining dependent on systems that create conflict. Her vision of a more independent kingdom becomes increasingly important as the leaders begin thinking about what comes next. Nanisca's journey also reaches an emotional turning point because she is finally able to release some of the pain she has carried for so long. She has spent years fighting enemies outside herself while also fighting memories from her past. Through Nawi, she discovers that her suffering does not have to be passed on to another generation. She can choose to protect rather than destroy, to heal rather than remain trapped by revenge. Her strength as a warrior remains important, but her greatest victory is emotional. She has survived her past and can finally begin imagining a future that is not controlled by it. Nawi stands among the surviving Agojie with a completely different understanding of herself. She arrived at the palace as a young woman who believed that freedom meant refusing to obey anyone. She leaves the conflict understanding that true strength comes from choosing what is worth protecting. The Agojie have taught her discipline, courage, loyalty, and responsibility. She has also learned that family can be created through shared experiences and genuine care. The women around her gave her a place where she could grow, and now she is prepared to help protect that community herself. The surviving warriors return with pride, but also with grief. The victory is meaningful because Dahomey has resisted a powerful enemy, but the cost is impossible to forget. Nanisca knows that leadership requires remembering those who sacrificed their lives. The Agojie honor their fallen sisters by continuing to live according to the values they fought for. Their bond remains strong because their experiences have created a connection that cannot easily be broken. The kingdom now sees these women not simply as soldiers, but as symbols of strength and resilience. King Gezo's decision to support changes in Dahomey's future gives Nanisca hope that the sacrifices made during the conflict will lead to something meaningful. The kingdom has an opportunity to move away from dependence on the Oyo and begin establishing a stronger identity. Nanisca's vision has survived the battlefield, and the Agojie have demonstrated that they can defend a kingdom while also inspiring change within it. The future will not be easy, but the people of Dahomey now have a reason to believe that they can shape it themselves. Nawi's journey comes full circle as she looks toward the future with the Agojie. She is no longer the frightened young woman who arrived after refusing an arranged marriage. She has become a warrior with a clear sense of identity and purpose. Her relationship with Nanisca gives her a deeper connection to her past, while her bond with the Agojie gives her a community in the present. Instead of allowing her painful experiences to define her, she has transformed them into strength. Her story shows how a person can discover freedom not by running away from every responsibility, but by choosing the people and values that truly matter. The victory gives Dahomey a new opportunity, but the warriors know that protecting the kingdom will always require courage. The Agojie remain ready to defend their people, and Nanisca understands that her role is no longer simply to lead them into battle. She must also help prepare the next generation and guide the kingdom toward a more independent future. Nawi and the younger warriors represent that future. They have learned from the veterans, experienced the realities of war, and developed the strength needed to continue the Agojie's legacy. The bond between the generations becomes a symbol of hope for Dahomey as the kingdom begins moving forward after the conflict. The story of the woman king reaches its emotional conclusion. As Dahomey emerges from its brutal conflict with the Oyo Empire and the Agojie stand stronger than ever. The women have faced overwhelming danger, painful losses, and the possibility of losing their kingdom, yet they refuse to surrender. General Nanisca has led them through the darkest moments while carrying the weight of her own traumatic past. For years, she believed that strength meant hiding her pain and allowing her experiences to make her harder. But her journey with Nawi forces her to see strength differently. She realizes that protecting someone, loving someone, and allowing yourself to heal can require just as much courage as fighting an enemy. Nawi has also changed completely. She entered the palace as a rebellious young woman who wanted to escape a future chosen by someone else. But through the Agojie, she discovers discipline, purpose, sisterhood, and the confidence to make her own decisions. The women who once seemed like strangers have become her family, and the warrior she becomes is defined not simply by her ability to fight, but by her willingness to protect those who stand beside her. The victory over the Oyo forces gives Dahomey a chance to change the direction of its future. King Gezo has witnessed the strength of the Agojie and the sacrifices they have made to protect the kingdom. Nanisca's ideas about independence and change can no longer be ignored. She has spent much of her life fighting because she believed survival required strength. But now she wants Dahomey to become strong enough that constant war is no longer the only way to protect its future. Her desire to move away from the systems that have created conflict becomes increasingly important. The kingdom has an opportunity to reconsider its dependence on the slave trade and begin looking toward other forms of prosperity. Nanisca understands that changing an entire kingdom will not happen overnight, but the victory gives her and King Gezo the opportunity to begin that process. For Nawi, the events of the story have completely transformed her understanding of freedom. When she first arrived at the palace, she believed freedom meant refusing to accept anyone else's authority. She rejected the marriage her father tried to arrange because she wanted control over her own life. However, her experience with the Agojie teaches her that freedom also comes with responsibility. She learns to follow orders when necessary, trust other people, protect her sisters, and make decisions that benefit more than just herself. Her independence becomes stronger because it is based on confidence rather than rebellion. She no longer needs to prove that she can survive alone. She understands that accepting the support of others does not make her weak. Instead, the strength she finds through the Agojie allows her to become the person she always had the potential to be. Nanisca's relationship with Nawi is one of the most important emotional developments in the story. Their connection is complicated by the painful events of the past, but it also gives both women an opportunity to heal. Nanisca has spent years carrying memories that affected every decision she made as a warrior. She feared that the same violence would eventually reach Nawi, and this fear often made her appear extremely strict and distant. Once the truth about their connection becomes clear, Nawi begins understanding that Nanisca's behavior was shaped by love as much as by fear. Nanisca, in turn, sees that Nawi has grown into a strong and independent warrior who no longer needs to be treated as someone fragile. Their relationship becomes a symbol of healing across generations, showing that the pain of the past does not have to determine the future. The Agojie themselves remain at the heart of Dahomey's strength. Their greatest achievement is not simply defeating an enemy, but proving what can happen when women stand together with discipline and purpose. Each warrior brings different qualities to the group, but their unity allows them to become stronger than they would be individually. Agojie, Nawi, Nanisca, and the other women demonstrate that courage can take many forms. Some warriors are natural leaders, some are mentors, and others discover their abilities only after being given the opportunity to prove themselves. Their sisterhood creates a powerful sense of belonging, especially for women like Nawi, who previously had no clear place in the world. The Agojie become more than soldiers. They become a community where strength is shared and where every woman is expected to contribute to the survival of the whole group. The sacrifices made during the conflict are not forgotten. The surviving warriors understand that their victory came at a heavy cost, and they carry the memories of those who died. Nanisca knows that leadership is not only about celebrating victories. It is also about remembering the people who made those victories possible. The fallen warriors remain part of the Agojie story, and their sacrifices give greater meaning to the future the survivors are now trying to build. Nawi experiences this grief as well, and it changes her understanding of what it means to survive. She realizes that surviving a battle is not the end of responsibility. Those who remain must carry forward the values and dreams of those who were lost. King Gezo's changing attitude toward the future of Dahomey gives the kingdom a new direction. He has seen the consequences of conflict and understands that simply maintaining old traditions will not guarantee long-term security. Nanisca's arguments have forced him to consider how Dahomey can become economically and politically independent. The kingdom still faces challenges, but the possibility of change is now real. Nanisca has proven that the Agojie can defend Dahomey, and she wants that strength to be used not only for war, but also to protect a better future for the people. Her vision is bigger than the battlefield. She wants the next generation to inherit a kingdom that is stronger, more independent, and less trapped by the conflicts of the past. Nawi's transformation also represents the future of the Agojie. She is now one of the young warriors who can carry their traditions forward. She has learned from experienced women like Agojie and Nanisca, and she understands the importance of discipline and loyalty. Her journey proves that the Agojie are not simply a group of warriors created for one generation. Their strength can continue through the women they train and inspire. Nawi's courage is no longer based on anger or frustration. It comes from knowing who she is and understanding what she is willing to protect. She has found a family, a purpose, and a place where her abilities are respected. Nanisca's personal journey reaches a powerful point because she finally understands that she does not have to remain trapped by the person she became after suffering. She can continue being a strong warrior while also allowing herself to experience happiness and connection. Her past will always be part of her, but it no longer has to control every decision she makes. The relationship she develops with Nawi allows her to see that the future can be different. Instead of only fighting against the forces that hurt her, she can fight for something positive: the safety, independence, and future of the people she loves. The story also highlights the importance of giving people opportunities to discover their potential. Nawi's abilities were not immediately obvious when she first arrived. She was stubborn, inexperienced, and unfamiliar with military discipline. But the Agojie gave her a chance to develop. Through training, friendship, and responsibility, she discovered strengths she did not know she possessed. This idea extends beyond Nawi. The Agojie themselves demonstrate that women who are given the opportunity to train, lead, and protect their community can become powerful forces for change. Their achievements challenge the expectations placed upon them and show that strength is not limited to one kind of person. The final moments of the story leave Dahomey looking toward a future that is still uncertain but filled with possibility. The kingdom has survived a major threat, and the Agojie remain prepared to defend it. Nanisca stands as a leader who has survived enormous personal pain and transformed that experience into determination. Nawi stands beside her as part of a younger generation that represents hope and continuity. Their relationship reflects the larger transformation taking place within Dahomey. The old world has been challenged, and although change will take time, the kingdom now has the courage to imagine something different. The journey from the beginning to the end is therefore not simply about winning a war. It is about the transformation of women who refuse to allow their circumstances to determine their future. Nawi discovers her identity. Agojie demonstrates the power of mentorship and sisterhood, and Nanisca learns that true strength can include vulnerability and healing. The Agojie fight together because they understand that their lives are connected. Their courage becomes stronger when they protect one another, and their victories become meaningful because they are fighting for a community rather than individual glory. The Woman King ultimately presents a powerful story of courage, sisterhood, leadership, sacrifice, and the struggle for independence. Nanisca's journey shows how a person can carry enormous pain and still choose to protect others, while Nawi's journey demonstrates how one young woman can transform from a rebellious outsider into a confident warrior with a clear sense of purpose. The Agojie become a symbol of strength because they refuse to allow fear to define them. Their battles are difficult and their victories come with sacrifice, but their determination changes the people around them and gives Dahomey a chance to imagine a different future. The story closes with the women standing together, carrying the memories of those they lost while looking toward the future they fought to protect. Their greatest victory is not simply defeating an enemy, it is proving that courage, unity, and the willingness to challenge an old way of life can create the possibility of something better. The Woman King is ultimately a powerful historical action drama about women who fight not only for survival, but also for identity, freedom, family, and the future of their kingdom. From Nawi's first uncertain steps into the Agojie to Nanisca's final acceptance of her past, the story shows how courage can transform lives. The Agojie demonstrate that strength comes from unity, discipline, sacrifice, and the willingness to stand beside others when fear is at its greatest. Nanisca becomes more than a military leader. She becomes a symbol of resilience and change, while Nawi represents the next generation that can carry that legacy forward. The story reminds us that the past may shape who we become, but it does not have to control who we will be. When people find the courage to challenge fear, protect one another, and fight for a better future, even the most difficult circumstances can begin to change.